Tonight, President Trump and his legal team minimizing the Russia probe, but a former federal prosecutor joins us to discuss just how serious the accusations are. Then, as a government shutdown looms, President Trump still saying he'll shut it down if Congress doesn't give him $5 billion for his border wall. A member of the Democratic leadership joins us to discuss what Dems are doing to keep the government open. Also, instead of playing along with SNL's impressions, President Trump, he's actually threatening NBC and other networks. We're going to show you how prior presidents responded and actually had a little fun with the stuff like this. Evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Now, as the Mueller probe heats up, the president's team trying to play things down here. Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani, he did the rounds in the Sunday shows, and he attempted to make a joke of the entire thing. Take a listen.
They're going to go try to look for unpaid parking tickets and see if they can nail them for unpaid parking.
Well, as you know, the Southern District said this is far more serious than an unpaid parking ticket. They said this strikes at the heart of our democratic system.
Oh, right. A campaign finance violation? Give me a break.
Just mentioned, Rudy used to be a U.S. attorney. But anyway, and I hate to break it to Rudy, but these violations, we're talking felonies here, not misdemeanors like a parking ticket. So no laughing matter. By the way, before Giuliani was mayor of New York, as I mentioned, he was a U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. That means he worked for the Justice Department and presumably ought to know better than almost anybody how these cases work. And with that in mind, listen to Giuliani talking about the Department of Justice.
I am disgusted with the tactics they have used in this case. What they did to General Flynn should result in discipline. They're the ones who are violating the law. They're looking at a non-crime collusion. The other guys are looking at a non-crime campaign violations, which are not violations. And they are the ones who are violating the law, the rules, the ethics, and nobody wants to look at them.
Now, speaking of Flynn, the former national security advisor, he is set to be sentenced tomorrow. After Trump fired Flynn, he sent a tweet explaining why he did it. Now, again, this is the president's own words. I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. It is a shame because his actions during the transition were lawful. There was nothing to hide. Since then, Trump and his team, they've been blasting prosecutors, even saying they lured Flynn into the perjury trap. In a court filing on Friday, Mueller, he defended his office's handlings of Flynn, and he went directly to the critics. Here, part of the filing, quote, a sitting national security advisor, former head of an intelligence agency, retired lieutenant general, and 33-year veteran of the armed forces knows he should not lie to federal agents. He does not need to be warned that it's a crime to lie to federal agents. And by the way, two of Flynn's former associates, they're now facing federal charges. They're accused of failing to register as foreign agents as they covertly lobbied on behalf of the Turkish government. And that brings us back to Rudy and whether or not Trump will ever sit for that interview with Mueller's team. Here's the exchange.
Here's the special counsel. Does he want to interview the president?
Yeah, good luck. Good luck. After what they did to Flynn, the way they trapped him into perjury, and no sentence for him, 14 days for Papadopoulos, I did better on traffic violations than they did with Papadopoulos.
So when you say good luck, you're saying no way, no interview.
They're a joke over my dead body.
By the way, the Russia probe is not the only legal problem for the president, far from it. His inauguration, his transition, the Trump Foundation, the Trump Organization, the administration itself, all subjects of various probes and investigations. As they say, stay tuned. Now, here to talk about that and more, former federal prosecutor Stanley Tuerti. And Stanley, let's first deal with Rudy. The idea of any former U.S. attorney basically saying that his former office is nothing more than a glorified extortionist, and that you minimize federal crimes as parking tickets. I mean, there's one thing to advocate for a client, but to tear down the entire Justice Department in the process, I mean, even for Rudy, I'm surprised he went that far.
I am too, and it's really unfortunate to have any lawyer to talk this way, especially former prosecutor, because it's the rule of law that he's going after, and the rule of law is what makes this country a great country. We were founded upon the principle of rule of law. It's the contract that keeps the citizens and the government going here. And you're right, this is far from traffic tickets.
And can you please
Sure.
put down this argument that Flynn was duped, that he was some babe in the woods who went there and that they tried to dupe him into some kind of false confession? Come on.
So there's no way it was a false confession. If you read the indictment of his colleague, his partner, and his colleague today, you see what actually affirmatively Flynn did. He actually lied. The Department of Justice reached out to him with these other two people to ask whether or not he should be registered as an agent of Turkey. And he lied to the Department of Justice then there.
And by the way, one of the things he did that people can get their arms around, because it's not that esoteric, is there was a cleric, a Turkish cleric, who was on American soil that we gave sanctuary to, okay, that the current Turkish government considered an enemy of the state, and they wanted this guy back, and they believed they wouldn't make it a day on Turkish soil if he ever stepped back foot. And literally, Flynn was trying to basically work with the Turks here to get this guy extradited to send him back to appease Erdogan and friends here. So this isn't some, they're trying to get somebody in an embassy gig or whatever else.
They were looking to get him extradited back where he would be killed.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. You mentioned the rule of law. Right. Mr. Comey was back on Capitol Hill today, and he said the following when he came after a closed-door meeting with lawmakers.
Another day of Hillary Clinton's emails and the Steele dossier. This while the President of the United States is lying about the FBI, attacking the FBI, and attacking the rule of law in this country. Republicans used to understand that the actions of a president matter, the words of a president matter, the rule of law matters, and the truth matters. Where are those Republicans today? At some point, someone has to stand up and in the face of fear of Fox News, fear of their base, fear of mean tweets, stand up for the values of this country and not slink away into retirement, but stand up and speak the truth. It undermines the rule of law. This is the President of the United States calling a witness who has cooperated with his own Justice Department a rat. Say that again to yourself at home and remind yourself where we have ended up. This is not about Republicans and Democrats. This is about what does it mean to be an American. There's a set of values that represent the glue of this country, and they are under attack by things just like that. We have to stop being numb to it. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, you need to stand on your feet, overcome your shame, and say something.
To that point, and for anyone, please don't delude yourself that that's some bleeding heart liberal here, Comey. I mean, by all intents, he was recruited by the Republican Party to run for offices in years past. But be that as it may, he's right. When I heard the President of the United States call a cooperating witness a rat, he sounded like a bad impression of a mob don.
That's exactly
Really, right?
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. In the whole process, these are people who are loyal. If you listen to Mr. Cohen's, what he said at his sentencing and what he said since about the loyalty, the blind loyalty that he has had to the president, and that's what happens with mobsters. They have blind loyalty to the head of the mob. And that's what we're seeing here. I mean, this really is very, very discouraging as to the whole conduct that's taking place here. And what's interesting, by the way, is that we know that Paul Manafort, according to the sentencing memorandum, has met with the government 12 times. Okay, we know that Cohen has met with the government 7 times, with the U.S. Attorney's Office twice. People are in there talking and spending a lot of time. There's a lot of information that's coming out here. Again, this indictment today in the Eastern District of Virginia. By the way, again, this is Flynn's colleagues. It's not Mueller who's going after them. This is the Justice Department, Eastern District of Virginia, who's picking up on what Flynn has told them and going after these other people. And something that's very serious. I mean, lying about whether or not you're an agent of a foreign country. I mean, where do we go as a nation when we have people who just, with impunity, can say, I don't work for a foreign country. Just screw you. I'm going to go do whatever I want to.
And please put up some cynicism for a moment. Why do you think it is that Flynn right now is putting out messaging that he was coerced into this? Probably because of some pretty damning testimony that he gave. He's trying to find a rationale for, hey, I didn't want to say all this is not true. If he didn't say anything and didn't really have anything to contribute to the probe here, you probably wouldn't have heard Bo Peep, okay? But that's my, at least, sense. Now, the scope of this, I think sometimes gets lost. Take a look, we have a graphic, of the amount of investigations that the President of the United States, his organization, I'm talking the Trump Organization, the charitable arms here, I'm talking about the foundation, the inaugural committee where they're looking at where did the $107 million go, the Trump Organization, obviously, as we talked about, the campaign, the transition team. Listen, keep it up for a minute, guys. It's amazing to me. I don't care if you like the guy or you don't like the guy. For a guy who spent the better part of 18 months telling everybody how much money he had and how rich he was, as to how cheap he was in terms of exposing himself. The idea that you're going to basically raid the kitty, potentially, if you read between the lines, of that inaugural committee. There's a quid pro quo, as the allegations are at least going, that big donors would write a check, the money would get basically change hands, and some of the money would go in the pocket. Or that a charitable foundation, you're going to skim money off the top with the Trump Foundation or in other places. What might, at the end, doom him, beyond just dealing with the Russians, is old-fashioned greed for a guy who always said he didn't need the money.
But isn't that always the bottom line?
I guess so.
Isn't it always the bottom line? It's the greed that does people in, ultimately. You know, and you look at all this, and this is nothing but greed throughout the whole process here. And it's something that you know, really has to be of concern for us as a country. And going back to what Mr. Comey said is, you know, when are people going to start speaking out in Congress? You know, if you look back to the Nixon days, for a long time he had his supporters in the Senate, but ultimately something caused the dam to break. And the question is, will there be something here, whether it's Mueller's report, whether it's things we hear from others, you know, that take place? What's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back as far as Republican support for Trump?
Tomorrow, as it relates to Flynn and the sentencing, are you looking for anything in particular beyond what he will or won't get?
No, although I think that one of the things that might be going on here is that he may be trying to position himself for a pardon, you know, at the end of the day. And again, what the president is doing here is the president is reaching out beyond the law. He's reaching out to his base, you know, that he's not concerned about the courtroom. I don't think that's something that really enters into his mind, that rule of law. It's what can he do for the base? And the question is going to be, I think, what Flynn does is he's trying to set this up that Flynn was taken advantage of. Therefore, when I pardon Flynn, that, geez, you know, don't think that he was such a bad person. It was not a bad thing that I did in pardoning him.
There's been a question I never got a clear answer to, is when Sessions was there, and obviously he had recused himself, Rosenstein, by most understandings, was, you know, basically kept mum, and that the administration was completely in the dark as to the goings-on of the Mueller probe. Whitaker's there. How privy is Whitaker to what Mueller may have or doesn't have, and how much of that do you think, I assume all of it would be communicated to the White House, how much of that may contribute to the changing dynamic, which seems to the outside from an agitated and panicked president?
Well, I think he's agitated and panicked because everything's coming in on top of him now. Just all these things that are taking place in the courtroom, which he does not control. And I think that's as much as what's going on here, too. I do have to say that on a positive note, I'm quite encouraged by the nomination of Bill Barr to be our next Attorney General. He's a guy who's a straight shooter.
I was going to ask you about that,
I had the pleasure of working with him, and I know him well. He is somebody that will call it. He believes in the rule of law, and that is something that's very important for us right now.
Thank you so much, Stanley. I always
pleasure.
appreciated interesting days. All right, coming up next, a government shutdown is looming here in the White House. They're playing hardball over the border wall. A member of the Democratic House leadership who'll join us next to discuss that and more.